Yesterday on Rise of Kingdoms official Facebook, they showed off Belisarius Prime, the next Cavalry commander's whole entire skill kit, from his active skill to his expertise. And some people say he's underwhelming, and some people say he's a fairly strong commander. And in today's video, I'm going to be testing Belisarius Prime to see if he is actually a strong commander. So if you're interested in some early results before he is released into the game of what he may be able to do when he does come out, you need to stick around till the end of the video. Now, I would like to start off today's video with a very quick disclaimer, and that is, when it comes to testing any commander on the Rise of Kingdoms tester, this is just a simulator made by a separate person. It's not made by Lilith, it's not 100% accurate, but I do find it's not only fun to just see what these commanders could do, but it's usually around 90% accurate to how the commanders may be on release. Of course, there may be some drastic thing that is being overlooked in the simulator, and maybe something just isn't right, and in those cases, the results are not 100% accurate. So I wouldn't take these as like the final results of Belisarius Prime, but I would take these as a good preliminary look really into what he could do. With that disclaimer out of the way, let me take you to the simulator. So now here is the Rise of Kingdoms simulator, the battle simulator, and it is basically a way to test out commanders and see how well they fight and how well they trade. And really today, I'm going to be trying to use the simulator to see how well Belisarius can do with a bunch of different commanders against a bunch of meta commanders. It is important to note the stats I'm running today. Each side has 310,000 troops, with whichever civilization I think is best for them. So for infantry, it's France, for archers, it's Ottoman, and for cavs, it's Byzantium. Sometimes I run all Ottoman, but I think it's a bit unfair there because archers get a huge advantage. I gave each side 20% health to mimic a 10% health skin and also a 10% health rune. Each side has a 5% defense buff with a full iconic, not talent piece, or not talent set, of their gear. I didn't go through with making the gear a little bit different for each troop type, because once again I'm trying to keep it as just stable as possible. Each side has VIP levels 13 to 16, which means they have the same stats, and they've got an all damage boost of 40%, and this is just to mimic being in KVK, because in KVK everybody has a minimum all damage boost of 40%. So this is probably really as fair as I could get the testing to be, and it is pretty much accurate whenever you test it like this, since there's no one side that's got a huge advantage. It's pretty much dead equal in terms of the gear and the stats that each side does have. As for the main commander pairings, we've got Howchabing with Belisarius. I also tested Nevsky with Belisarius because Nevsky is one of the strongest cav commanders, and as a control I tested Nevsky with Joan. A control is just basically a pairing that is already known to trade in a certain way and is already fairly stable. As for the marchers they are up against, we did Zulang and Herman for archers, we did Gorgo and Lao Che for infantry, I didn't run CPO, and we also did do Nevsky and Joan for cavalry because I think those are some of the more meta marchers, and Gorgo and Lao Che is just there because CPO and Lao Che doesn't do good in 1v1, so it would be unfair. The last thing I would like to say is Belisarius and also Howchabing and Nevsky, they're all single target commanders, and some of the commanders, or pretty much all the marchers we tested today, had at least one if not two AoE commanders, which definitely does throw it off a little bit. So that means this march is probably not going to perform as well as it may look today on the open field, just because open field is not a 1v1. But that being said, if we start the battle here, you can see that Belisarius' expertise won't work in this simulator. So technically he could be dealing up to 12% more all damage if the opponent is being swarmed. So Belisarius is losing out on some of his value here, but he's also gaining more because it's a 1v1 and he does single target damage. With that all out of the way though, let's get into the results. Now let's just start off with the Gorgo Lao Che results, and here are Howchabing Belisarius reports against Gorgo Lao Che, and you can see first report, Howchabing Belisarius lost about 6,000 7 there, not the worst considering they are the losing troop, and it is probably to be expected. Second report, they lost by about 8,000 7. This is once again to be expected. Cavalry should be losing to infantry, so this is fairly healthy, and then again here they lost by about 6,000. And then on the fourth report, they only lost by 3,000. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy here. I'm guessing that maybe Howchabing and Belisarius had a lot of horn triggers or a lot of ring triggers, or maybe some of Howchabing's talents triggered more. That's certainly a possibility. Just keep in mind with Rise of Kingdoms, there is a lot of percentage chances for things to happen. So some of these reports are going to be very different from others. But that being said, so far this looks like what we expected until the last report where Howchabing Belisarius won by 9,007 wounds. So I'm not sure what happened there. Once again, I'm just guessing how being Belisarius got super lucky. Maybe Belisarius' active skill, which is dealing the rage increase on Gorgo's active skill, maybe it triggered at a really good time and made her skill way harder to throw. That's certainly possible. But really, I think this is what we would expect. Gorgo Lao-Che won pretty much all the reports there by at least 3 to 5, sometimes 8,007 wounds, except when they lost this last report, which I would just call a outlier. It's not really what I would expect to happen in the actual game. That being said though, this is what I would expect from the Gorgo Lao-Che against Hao Bing. As for Nevsky Belisarius against Gorgo Lao-Che, well, Nevsky's losing by a bit more here. He lost by 8,007 wounds, then he lost by 15,007 wounds, then he lost by 7,007 wounds, then he lost by around 10,000, and the final report he also lost by pretty much 10,000 on the dot as well. So I think we can just pull away from these reports here. Nevsky with Belisarius is weaker than a Hao Bing with Belisarius, which is something that I predicted yesterday, because Hao Bing's fast rage cycle really works extremely well with Belisarius' active skills, so there's a lot of synergy there as well. As for the Nevsky and the Joan, I mean, this is what we would expect. Nevsky Joan lost by quite a bit of 7 wounds, 12,000 here, 14,000, another 14,000 loss, and another 12,007 wound loss. So it's definitely clear Belisarius does perform better than Joan in a 1v1 with Nevsky by around 3 to 5,007 wounds, but Hao Bing is clearly the stronger of the two archers, winning even one of the reports, which once again is an outlier, but still interesting to see. Now, as for Belisarius against Xulangs and Hermans, I predict him to be really good against these archers, since his fourth skill is pretty much just a way to counter both Herman and also Boudica, so that's very interesting, pretty much a direct counter there, and I mean, we would expect this. Hao Bing Belisarius won by around 13,007 wins on the first report. On the second report, they won by 8,000. On the third report, they won by 18,000. That's a really big number. And then on the fourth report, they won by 13,000. And on the final report, they won by around 16,000. So there's a really, really massive wins there for Hao Bing Belisarius. Once again, though, we have to keep in mind Xulang Herman is an AoE March, which means it can be much stronger on the field than it would be in a 1v1. That being said though, it is winning a lot of 1v1s nowadays, even though it is a double AoE commander, and Hao Bing Belisarius is able to pretty much destroy it. So I did expect that to be the case, just because Belisarius is clearly really just a very direct counter to a lot of the archer commanders like Xulang and Herman, and even Belisarius Prime, even though she isn't as meta now. As for Nevsky, I mean, he was still winning reports. He won the first report by about 5,007 wounds, but he did lose the second report by 5,000, pretty much just swapped there. Once again, I'm guessing that either Xulang and Herman got a bunch of skill triggers, or Nevsky just got really unlucky. As for the next report, Xulang Herman then lost by 18,007 wounds, which either one side got very lucky or one side got unlucky. Then the report after that, they lost by about 10,000, and on the final report, they lost by about 12,000. So it's quite obvious that Nevsky Belisarius can beat Xulangs and Hermans. That's just not something up for debate. That being said, though, there is this one report here that Nevsky Belisarius did lose. So once again, Nevsky Belisarius seems a lot more inconsistent than the Hao Bing. Of the 10 reports that I did with Hao Bing, he didn't lose a single time. When I did 10 reports for Nevsky, I'm not showing all 10, Nevsky lost around twice, I think. So there's definitely something there that is making him lose. And once again, I still think that Hao Bing with Belisarius is still the stronger pair, even against the archer commanders, just because of the really better trades than the Nevsky. As for Nevsky Joan, well, the first report, really normal. This is what we see on the open field nowadays. 127 wounds to 36,883 wounds, and that's pretty typical. Being serious though, the next report, this is really what we've actually seen a lot nowadays. Xulang Herman's beating Nevsky Jones. Xulang and Herman won this report by around 19,007 wounds. On the second report, they won by about 13,000. Third report, they won by around 15,000. Fourth report won by 14, and on the final report, won by 13,000. So this is what I've seen mostly with Xulangs and Hermans in 1v1s against Nevsky Jones, and I think that really it's quite obvious the new Cav commanders are trying to push that Xulang Herman out of being a crazy OP March that can even beat Cav. So definitely, Belisarius is an upgrade over the Joan in a 1v1 situation at least, against the Xulang and Herman. Obviously, open field Joan's AoE is almost unmatched, so that's not guaranteed to be the case, but obviously, we can see Xulang Herman is dealing a lot of damage to that Nevsky and Joan, and winning pretty much every single fight by a very consistent amount of 7 wounds. Now, the final battles I ran were against Nevsky and Joan themselves, just to see how well do these new Cav commanders do in a direct one-on-one, and I think it's pretty obvious. First report, Belisarius and Hao Bing won by 14,000 sevs. Second report, same thing, 14,000 sevs. Third report, they won by a lot more. This is 25,000 sev wounds, really massive jump there. And on the fourth report, they won by 16,000, and the final report, they won by 13,000. So fairly consistent results there, besides I think it's the third report where they won by a huge number. And I once again would expect this. Hao Bing Belisarius probably going to be one of the best 1v1 marches in the game. And Nevsky Drone is, yes, a good 1v1 march, but not the best. And I would expect it to lose to the new, better 1v1 commanders. As for Nevsky Belisarius, I mean, it's very similar results. First report, 14,000. Second report, they won by 23,000. Third report, they actually won by 24,000. And then on the fourth report, 21,000 sevs. And the final report, 24,000. So oddly enough, Nevsky Belisarius did do a little bit better. I think the reason for this is, well, unknown. I actually couldn't tell you why I think Alexander Nevsky could beat Nevsky better than Hao Bing could. You would expect Hao Bing to do better. I'm not too sure why that's the case, it just is the case. And I would say that really Nevsky and Joan, while it is still going to be probably the meta cav march just for the AoE, it's no longer the meta for 1v1s. It was Alexander Nevsky, Hao Bing before, but now I think Hao Bing with Belisarius or Nevsky with Belisarius will become the more meta 1v1 march and will be definitely one of the stronger marches for things such as swarming down a flag or swarming down a city. So now what can we really take away from those testing results? And I think the first thing we can take away is that Nevsky is not Belisarius' best pair. And I did say this yesterday, I don't think Nevsky is going to be Belisarius' best pair, and it's quite obvious Nevsky isn't Belisarius' best pair, just because really Nevsky doesn't have that really fast rage cycle that allows you to outrage your opponents and pretty much silence them. When we look at Belisarius' active skill, if it triggers at the right time, it's a 3-second silence. That's really what it is. And when we consider that in that fact, it's like having a Guan Yu. You either want to be way slower than the target, so that by the time you get your active skill, they're at their second active skill, or you want to outrage them, so by the time they reach their active skill, you can silence their active skill. It is literally a way to just silence the opponent without directly silencing them. So commanders like Boudica Prime and commanders like Zulang who shrug off those silences cannot do that anymore because, well, you can't shrug off a rage reduction, or even, in that matter, a rage increase, which is what Belisarius does. So when we look at these commanders, these new calves, especially Belisarius, clearly is made to counter those archer commanders, and I think that's quite an obvious fact, and I just don't think Nevsky really suits him as well, in the regard that he cannot really outrage a Zulang and a Herman much better than any other commander. That being said though, Hao Bing can easily outrage a Zulang with a Herman, especially for the first few 15 seconds really after you enter combat, because his rage cycle is just that much cheaper. So it's going to really allow you to get a little bit of a head start against not only your opponents, but especially going to allow that Belisarius to get a head start on his active skill and start basically silencing your enemies. So that's definitely something that's really good about Belisarius with a Hao Bing, and it's probably why Belisarius Hao Bing is going to become the new meta cavalry march for Belisarius at least. One thing a lot of people ask me is, what do I think about Hao Bing with William? Will it still remain better? I honestly am not 100% sure until we see real in-game results and how it actually performs in a murder ball, because William as a supporting commander is really good. I mean, he's got the rage gain for your marches, which can allow you to get ridiculous amounts of active skills going whenever he does do that. So it's just something to consider. William is still a very powerful support commander, and William also has AoE. So despite his damage being weaker, he's got the AoE that almost makes up for it. And once again, when you think about that, his supporting stuff is just too strong to say no to. But then Belisarius is also a really good supporting commander. If I were to be fully upfront, I think that Belisarius has potential to replace William and go within the top 2 cav marches, but I think we can guarantee at least he'll be within the best 3 cav marches, and I think it would probably go like a Nevsky with a Joan, a Hao Bing with a Belisarius, and then maybe an XY with a William, or an XY Belisarius, Hao Bing William. Those are 2 possible routes you could go, depending on once we see real in-game testing. So I think Belisarius isn't as bad as people think he is, but I don't think he'll be the meta-shifting commander a lot of cav players want. And that is somewhat good news for people who are playing infantry, because a lot of infantry players were saying, we've just received the first good commander in like a decade, and they don't really want to be trashed on anymore. So they were pretty happy when, a lot of infantrymen really were happy when the new cav was not too overpowered. So that's something we should consider. And for archers, I mean, Belisarius is definitely countering them, but depending on how common he is, it probably wouldn't really impact archer players too much. So unless a lot of people max out Belisarius, you're not going to really be too impacted by him, because I think a lot of people who just have William will probably stick with him, because Belisarius is, even if he is an upgrade, not too much of an upgrade. So I don't think we'll see many Belisariuses on the field, at least for the next maybe year or so, and maybe we'll see like a gradual build up of more players using him, but this is definitely subject to real in-game testing once he fully releases. So now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to let you guys know I will be live at 22:30 UTC tomorrow. That's a really specific time. It's just when I can wake up without feeling like a zombie, and I'll be doing the Pass 7 battle against our enemies. So if you guys are interested in seeing possibly who even wins this KVK, trust me, it'll be a fun time. Come on down to the stream. There's going to be open field fighting, rallying, swarming. Pretty much everything you can imagine is going to go down. This is going to be one intense battle, and personally, I'm really excited for it. So if you want to see some good old rallies, some good old pass defense or pass offense, and maybe you want to see me open fielding a couple marches, getting a couple of kills, getting a bunch more deads, then trust me, it will be fun. This is going to be probably some of the most jam-packed live streaming I'm doing in a while, because I'll be doing Pass 7 for probably 3 days straight, depending on how long the fight lasts, and then I'll be streaming Kingsland as well. So if you want to see how my KVK goes, the very drama-filled one, trust me, come on down to the stream, 22:30 UTC, link in the pinned comment and also in the description. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.